How's it going, Moving Millennials? Welcome to episode number 183 of the podcast. And this episode's a little bit different in the sense that I don't think I have done an interview-based episode for at least 30 to 40 episodes. Many of you know that in September, I was on this kick where I was podcasting every day at about 7 a.m. in the morning. And those were solo shows, and I was simulcasting on Facebook Live. But I have stumbled upon the work and the ideas of a lady named Dayna Martin. And so I reached out to Dayna on Facebook, and she has agreed to hop on and have a conversation with me today. And I had to share this with you as a generation and a community of game changers. I truly believe that the person sitting on the screen in front of me is someone who has potentially some real oxygen for this community. And so I just want to, first of all, welcome you, Dayna, to this conversation and to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm really excited about being here. Thanks for inviting me.
I want to just begin by just kind of giving our listeners and viewers right now on YouTube a little bit of background and some context about who you are, kind of where you've come from. And I don't know that we'll get too deep into your story because there are so many places where they can really hear your story in tremendous depth and detail through YouTube and such. I want to just dive into a conversation, but just so everyone knows why the heck I invited Dayna onto the podcast. She has been inspiring others for over a decade by sharing her experience through natural birth, attachment parenting, and something called unschooling. She's an activist, educator, and the author of Radical Unschooling, A Revolution Has Begun. She's also the author of a book called Sexy Birth. And I believe, Dayna, do you have another book coming out shortly called Radical Birth?
Yeah, it's an updated version of Sexy Birth. It's like part 2.
2.0, got it.
Yep.
She has proudly advocated for radical unschooling through the media for the last 8 years. This has allowed thousands of other parents to learn about unschooling and to proudly live their lives without fear. We'll talk about that in this conversation. The movement of unschooling is growing tremendously thanks to her bravery and unrelenting drive to share unschooling with the world. Her choice to live out loud is one with powerful inspiration that is changing the world and offering more respect, peace, and freedom to families worldwide. She's been featured on Dr. Phil, CNN, Nightline, Australia's most popular morning news program, Morning Sunrise, Jeff Probst Show, ABC's hit show Wife Swap, Fox News, 60 Minutes Australia, and The Bethenny Show. And Moving Millennials as of today. We can add that to the list. I won't go on too much, but some of you may be wondering, this is probably, thinking back, this is definitely the first episode where we have focused on the topic of parenting. As many of you know, I'm a new dad. The little Brady is 7 months now. And so when that happens, I didn't really see this coming, but all of a sudden I am voraciously learning everything that I can about how to best bring Brady or support Brady in coming and growing up in today's world. So I have stumbled across Dayna's work. I've been tremendously intrigued and inspired by her ideas, and I just had to have a conversation. So first of all, Dayna, I would love it if you, because the word unschooling has popped up a few times now just in your bio, and I know there are people listening who've never heard the word before because I had not heard the word up until about a month ago. So just give our listeners a brief definition of what unschooling is.
Okay, sure. Most people have heard of homeschooling. Unschooling is really different. I'd say presently it's like 1% of homeschoolers unschool. So it's a pretty small percentage. However, it's growing tremendously, and especially in the last 10 years. Well, unschooling is living life as though school doesn't exist. Now, I'm going to explain in detail what I mean by that. It's not uneducating. Unschooling is not uneducating. It's not unparenting. I think the name is like, you kind of have a love-hate relationship with it. I do as an advocate, because it kind of sounds like you're not educating, but you're not approaching education with the trappings of school. So most people, when they homeschool, they buy a curriculum and they do exactly what the schools do at home. So they're following the curriculum, and it's like a cookie cutter education. And unschooling is really different, where education is really important to our family.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel as though the solid foundation of family and our passions and interests in life are always the driving force. And a side effect of living that way and freedom with our kids, they happen to get an amazing education as a side effect. So we do not break life down into subjects. We don't compartmentalize their learning. My job as their parent and as their unschooling facilitator is to bring as many resources into their lives to learn and grow from based on their interests. So, I mean, there's so much to share about it. That's like
I totally get it.
Yeah, it's like the base foundation.
It's interesting you talk about just the term and the name. And I think, I've done a little bit of research now, but I believe it was John Holt who first coined the term unschooling.
Yeah, in the 70s.
This is back in the 70s.
Yeah, it was kind of a joke.
It was like a funny thing. Yeah. I actually don't. I've thought about it, and I don't mind it. There's something to it. Putting the prefix "un" in front of a word, it kind of, for me, it prompts this idea that we have to undo something that has been done.
Yeah.
And so school, if you think about it, is something that, dare I say, has been done to us.
Yes.
And certainly as a parent, I mean, whether or not I think that's a great thing or an okay thing or a horrible thing, I'll leave that out of it for now. But I have gone through school. I went to JK, SK grade 1 all the way through grade 12. I have a university degree, and that's kind of my life so far. I mean, that was a few years ago now, but that has happened to me. And so what this movement is suggesting is that we need to go through some kind of process that undoes or releases some of the things that we've gone through, that have been done to us through this entire process that we have not always, but for quite a while now, called school. So that's kind of that's my take on the name. That's why I think it's kind of appropriate.
Yeah, definitely. I love that you shared its undoing. It's interesting because kids just naturally come to this life. It's nothing they have to even undo. Unless you're somebody who's pulling their child out of school, then there is a process called deschooling.
Okay.
It's like deprogramming in a way. But I think people get confused because they hear, like, schooling and education are not the same thing.
Right.
Schooling is institutionalizing somebody. When we all went through it, the focus is on obedience, compliance, and jumping through certain hoops and pleasing the adults. And it's an authoritarian paradigm, which is, to me, very outdated. It's very disrespectful. It's not catering to the individual as a learner or as a human being. And I really believe that we're not all meant to learn the same things in life.
Sure.
So the process of, like, unschooling, or sometimes called deschooling, when a parent first comes into it, is you do have to unbrainwash yourself as seeing things in like schooly lenses.
Yeah. I was thinking about that.
Big deal.
Tell me if you think this even makes sense, but this morning in the shower, I'll be honest, I was in the shower, I was thinking about this conversation we were going to have tonight. And so I had this image of an ice cube tray. And you know, when you first put water in an ice cube tray and you put it in the freezer and it freezes, and at first the ice is completely attached to the tray. So if you were to hold it upside down, the ice doesn't fall out. And then once you like twist it, now the ice, like, it releases, and it's broken up into different individual cubes. And if you were to dump the tray upside down, all the ice cubes would fall to the floor. For me, I think that so many of us, not just in this area of life, but in so many different areas, whether it's relating to health and food and the healthcare system and other things, but we're kind of like ice cube trays with like frozen ice, and we have to kind of just be like shaken a little bit or twisted for some of these ideas that we're gripping onto so hard for them to be released a little bit. So the thing I wanted to start with is, what are some of the ideas, philosophies, belief systems that you think people, let's say parents, are gripping onto, that they need to, before anything happens, they need to kind of release their grip on these ideas? Like, what are some of those kind of pillars that we need to unlearn before we kind of begin to adopt this new philosophy?
That's a great question. I love your ice cube tray analogy, by the way. That's great. I mean, there's so much that we have to undo at different stages, but the idea that learning can only happen in a school, that's a huge thing to undo. I think that the idea that children or all humans need to know this kind of base foundation of all these different subjects, when that's not conducive to like a healthy unschooling, natural learning dynamic, because
right.
you know, everybody has a different calling and a different passion and a different purpose in life. And these things are picked up, like all these skills, these tools, like reading, writing, and math are all picked up as a side effect of just living a rich, full, exciting life together as a family. And by having resources in your home and, you know, lots of ways for kids to learn, from the internet to books to mentorships, hands-on experiences, you know, traveling, connecting with other people. And so I think the idea that certain things are of value more than others is a really important part of it. And to realize, I think when you embrace that, you were brainwashed and taught to believe that it was necessary, but it's not. And I think as you kind of break down like different components of our conditioning, it's really intense, you know, like it's a really emotional experience for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But once you start breaking them down, the rest kind of break down much easier. So, yeah.
Cool. And I don't know, I know a little bit about your background and your education prior to coming into all of this. For me, Dayna, I mean, I come from a family of professional educators. I'm surrounded by them. And they're all amazing. Like these are people that I admire, respect, and think are doing incredible things in the world. My wife is a teacher. She's been teaching for 7 years. She's on maternity leave right now, but that's her profession. And my mother and my father, both. My mom retired from teaching in the school system here about 4 years ago after 34 years. And my father retired just in June after 20-something years. My grandmother was a teacher. I have second cousins that were teachers. I was this close. I mean, I was 2 weeks away from going and getting my Bachelor of Education at University of Toronto after I did my undergrad, and I bailed on Teachers College about a week before. After putting forth a deposit, I decided to walk away from Teachers College and work at the Apple Store because I just wanted to.
That's great that you did that.
Yeah, and I never went back and did it. And you know, the people that are listening know a little bit about what I do now. It's interesting because all this stuff, as I've started to kind of tune into not just your work but other people's as well. You know, I'm a professional youth motivational speaker, so I've spoken to thousands and thousands of students in hundreds of schools. I go into schools all the time, and in this province, I've probably been to at least 250. And public schools, Catholic schools, private schools. And it's interesting because I was in a school all day today and working with my boys choir. I conducted 2 boys choirs at this one particular boys private school, all boys private school. They wear uniforms, and it's a fun place. But it's really caused some like a bit of dissonance in the sense that I'm kind of reevaluating and reflecting upon how I communicate with the students in front of me, how I speak to them, how I interact, which I think is only a good thing. Anytime you come across something that causes you to kind of go within and ask really important questions about why you do things the way you do, for me, that can only cause and become a catalyst for growth. But do you have a background similar? I mean, I don't know if everyone in your family is a teacher, but do you come from an educational background, so to speak?
Well, the interesting thing is a lot of teachers are unschooling parents. A lot. I mean, it's those of us interested in education. I went to college for early childhood education myself. Right. Once you understand it, you see that there's so many ways to learn. And I think teachers have like a real inside look that a lot of parents that don't. So if you're a parent and a teacher, you get this almost a lot sooner than somebody who's not. So it makes perfect sense that that's your background.
Yeah.
I mean, I never planned on educating or parenting this way. Like I just had no clue how I would be as a parent, and it happened so naturally and organically. I think that what I share about is something that everybody knows deep down, especially, well, those that are drawn to me and what I'm sharing in my work. Sure. I mean, as you said, like I'm just reminding you of what you already know. Somewhere inside your consciousness, this makes sense. And it did to you when you were young. And I think a big part of it to talk about is the whole aspect of children's rights. That children deserve more freedom and respect than schools can provide. It's understandable why schools have to educate the way they do with so few teachers and so many students, that obedience and compliance and kind of giving orders
Hmm.
so necessary. But when you're parenting this way, you never need to do that. So
Let's go there, because I know that you know what you teach and advocate for is something called radical unschooling. Can you explain to everyone listening right now and watching, what is the difference between unschooling and radical unschooling?
okay, there is a big difference.
Yeah.
Well, the education side of it is the same.
Okay.
So unschooling is living life as though school doesn't exist, facilitating your children's learning based on what they love, and it's a very hands-on role, and it's just educating in a really evolved, leading edge way. Radical unschooling is that same trust that parents have unschooling with their children's education, you extend to every area of their life. So instead of living in the traditional authoritarian paradigm, which 99% of people do, and which I can explain what that's about briefly. 99% of parenting books on the market, and experts and family and friends, the focus is on behavior modification when you're parenting, especially real, little ones, and you'll be getting that pressure soon too. I mean, even on shows like Nanny 911 and Super Nanny, the focus is on obedience, compliance, and behavior modification. And it's very, to me, it's very disrespectful to treat a child the way that we do, totally focused on behavior without focusing on their needs. So what I'm encouraging through radical unschooling is a partnership-based paradigm, which is very different. All the needs of everybody in our family matter equally. Our children, by the way, I have 4 kids, for those that don't know, a 17-year-old son, a 15-year-old daughter, a 11-year-old daughter, and an 8-year-old son, 2 boys and 2 girls.
Cool. And
they've never been punished in their lives. They've never done a workbook page. They've never done any schoolwork, yet they're amazing, respectful, kind, loving, educated, and inspired entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So it's really mind-blowing, I think. So yeah, whole life unschooling or radical unschooling as my book is titled.
I haven't heard that term yet.
Yeah, it's kind of interchangeable with radical unschooling. But it's our kids have freedom with food. They can eat whatever they want when they want. They have freedom with media of all kinds, whether it's computer or television. They can go to bed when they want. They have freedom at bedtime, and they also have freedom with their hygiene. Nothing is forced. Now, hearing all of that, I know that people think, and whatever your knee-jerk reaction was, and what most people think is your conditioning. Just be aware of that you're conditioned to respond to my words. Like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, and that's, to me, like, it's that moment, it's that awareness, right? That's the twisting of the ice cube tray. Because you have to, like, when you kind of catch that and say, oh, wait, where does that come from? That inner kind of like, oh, what? No rule, like hygiene, media. You're just saying all these things that for some people may cause, some like, is this lady totally out to lunch? And to me, it's bringing awareness is akin to twisting the ice cube tray. You have to loosen the ice cubes before you can release them, let them go, and flip it over, have a fresh tray, and then you can fill it up again with something else.
That's great. And the idea, I think, that when people react in such a way, like, oh my gosh, she's crazy, how could that be? And that's so neglectful, or whatever comes to your mind. You've been conditioned to have the assumption that if you weren't controlled and punished and forced, that you wouldn't make good choices. Like that was the reason given, because I love you and I'm doing this. It hurts me more than it hurts you. And like, we've been conditioned to believe that controlling authoritarian style of parenting and living is equal to being loved, and that any other way is abusive or hands-off or neglectful. That's all conditioning, and none of it's true. So in me sharing that my kids have always had freedom in these avenues of their life, I think people are surprised to hear that they go to bed when they're tired, they get plenty of sleep. We, have a rough rhythm to our day, routine. Those of us in the family who really like routine have our own routines, including me. My kids make really good choices. They're all vegan by choice, and for different reasons. My son Devin, who's 17, has been vegan for 2 years. I never thought he would be either, which is
it's not
crazy.
conspiracy though.
Yeah, it's all about conspiracy.
Yeah, it's all about conspiracy.
Yeah, especially for young adults.
Yes,
it is, because we are ashamed that we don't know what we know. But so nothing's forced upon them. They have the freedom to eat as much as they want of foods that other people would think of as junk. However, they don't, because it doesn't make sense to do so any more than it does for me or you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I heard you say, I don't know which video this was, but you mentioned at one point that when people have that knee-jerk response to some of the things that you share, a lot of the time it's because they weren't ever trusted as a kid.
Right.
And so they just inherently don't trust children to make great choices about their life in all of these different areas. Can you
Right.
speak to that for just a sec?
Yeah, I mean, we learn how to be in this world from our parents, how they were, and the adults in our lives. And as children, we were never trusted ourselves. We were told that we needed to be forced to do things because we'd make bad choices. And so you grow up kind of with these conditioned responses and feelings that you don't even know were there until you have kids. And I knew that my kids could be trusted from day one. We practiced attachment parenting, which was pretty controversial. And that's like a really close attachment style parenting, which includes co-sleeping, extended breastfeeding, holding your baby whenever they want to be held, all the things that might be categorized as like hippie or, natural or anything like that.
They just feel good. They just feel so much better. I mean, to me, us, yeah.
Totally, yeah. I mean, it's really natural. If you were on a island alone, what would you do? Would you like put your baby in another cave until they cried it out, and or would you cuddle them to keep them safe and they, keep them close to you? So radical unschooling to me is an extension of attachment parenting. Maybe attachment parenting is something that people might be able to understand first and see that it is the exact same philosophical approach, but with older children.
I think I love that we're having this conversation, because really and truly the millennial generation are the next generation that's going to be raising a lot of kids, or helping to support the growth of a lot of kids in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And if our results, and I know that with unschooling, like the word results is even something that like we're so conditioned to think about results, but I want to go there for a minute, because I want to speak about the topic of like what's coming to mind for me is that we're a generation with higher stats in terms of mental health challenges, anxiety, depression, than any generation to ever come before us. And so if we are going to raise a generation that is really mentally well, I believe that we have to start to look at different paradigms and doing things differently than perhaps our parents did. And that's not to offend our parents at all, because everyone just does what they know and does what they're doing their best at the time with resources and the ideas and the philosophies that they've been presented with. So this is not, and I hope that this conversation is not intended to offend anyone at all, but rather to just potentially encourage and inspire people to ask some hard questions that maybe you've never asked before. So does that make sense, Dayna, that like if we're going to help the next generation just deal with less of the real like inner struggles, especially with mental health that our generation has dealt with, that we got to change the way we're doing things a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, things are getting much worse in the institution of school because the labels that have come into play are nothing like when I was in school. The ADD, ADHD, and
that's all that stuff too. Yeah.
I mean, kids are, I think it was like 46% of kids are like drugged or medicated. Yeah. And the interesting thing is, if they didn't exist within that system, if they weren't in the system, they wouldn't have to conform and they wouldn't be labeled at all. They would just be totally supported in who they were. And so I think mental health is directly connected with how we were treated, as kids, and how other people see us. And it's like the pharmaceutical age right now. So to me, mental health issues is caused from other people trying to control you, whether it's from being drugged or labeled ADHD. I know there's exceptions. I know there are people that truly have disorders, and I'm not really speaking on them. I'm speaking on the crazy diagnosis of kids that just don't fit into the dynamic of sitting at a school desk and taking orders all day. Kids in this day and age, kids that are being born now are like pre-wired to sense and fight against injustice. We weren't, this is really an evolutionary perspective where kids are like protesting for their rights. Like, this isn't right. Like, it's not healthy for me to sit here and just listen to somebody, or, kids are just getting more demanding of their freedom and respect. And to people looking at this from inside the institution, they think it's like parents that aren't controlling enough, or that they should be punished more, or it seems like things are getting worse, but it's caused by control and the intention of the adults to make the child's behavior in the institution easier for them.
I have a colleague who I greatly admire and respect. He and his business partner are doing some phenomenal things, specifically in Tanzania with young people. And he wrote a post on Facebook just the other day about how there ought to be a greater focus in schools. He was talking about, what could happen in schools that isn't right now, but there ought to be a greater focus on helping kids to cultivate self-love and self-worth. And I just got thinking, I read his post and started to reflect upon that, and was putting it in context with what I've been learning from you and some other people over the past month. And the conclusion I came to fairly quickly was that ideally there shouldn't need to be any specific focus on self-love or self-worth, confidence. I mean, we need that as a reaction to what is caused, like into what we're potentially causing. Does that am I making sense at all, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really deep topic for sure. And I think that when you're raised the way most of us were, to be people pleasers, to make the adults happy with us in our lives, so we either get a good grade or we have freedom. I mean, a lot of times kids are so conditioned and controlled that their ultimate goal is freedom. They'll jump through whatever hoop necessary and become somebody they're not, just to have freedom and choices in life, because everything else is so controlled. So it's really hard for me to understand like why people can't see where things went so wrong for them. Like how hard, look at so many people today taking meditation, yoga, new age philosophical perspectives, just to try to gain some sense of who we really are, because it was so conditioned out of us for the ease of the adults in our lives as children. It's a really big deal, like how you choose to parent literally sets your child up for the rest of their life to either be struggling with self-esteem and living a life to please other people and not themselves, or parenting in a more free, respectful way. You never have to teach self-esteem or self-love, because it's totally natural to have that. Like we're supposed to. It's how our species has survived. Self-preservation is self-love, and my kids have never had to rebuild any of that. It's always been intact, and so they don't understand the concept of how somebody can hate themselves. It's a really interesting thing for me to watch watch kids who are raised in an authoritarian dynamic, because they don't get it. Like why? How could you hate yourself? Like
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So we're healing ultimately, without sounding too utopian. Like I really feel like we're healing the world and shifting toward a more peaceful, respectful dynamic, which is so important for moving toward world peace, by starting at home. When you focus on your children's needs as much as your own, and you don't treat them as things that need to obey or conform, then they're going to raise their kids that way too. And self-love will just be a thing that's like breathing. It's normal and natural.
I'm wondering if you can help myself and people listening right now, folks who are currently in their current circumstances operating in what I will just refer to as a traditional paradigm, a traditional school paradigm, traditional family paradigm. Obviously with anything like this, it doesn't necessarily, sometimes it can, I'm sure, for some people, but this type of lifestyle change doesn't always happen with a snap of a finger overnight. It's a process, and people come to it and discover it on their own time. But I mean, because of what I've been exploring over the past month or so, and it hasn't been very long, but I have changed the way that I've interacted with young people in my day-to-day work. And so you talk about the way that you parent being a partnership-based paradigm. I'm wondering if you could help people who are operating, maybe they're a teacher right now and they're going into school tomorrow. What little things can they do in their current role to begin applying and adopting a partnership-based approach to their work?
That's such a great question. It's and I love that you're asking, and I wish everybody that works with children would ask that question. I think, and also, like you said, it doesn't come to you like all at once. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because we if we're tired or hungry or not in a good place, a lot of times you can't parent or interact with children or anybody from a state of presence. So you're kind of like reacting with what's been conditioned. And
We're human, we're not perfect. Yeah.
We all do it. And at times, and apologizing to our children is a really big skill that many people are told never to do.
Yeah, those weaknesses.
I would say to really just start learning and thinking about the fact that the rights of any kind of group of people, it's just time in human history to give children more rights than they have. I posted something on my wall today. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if you saw it or not.
I think I saw it today.
Yeah, but it was in the 1950s even. Like, men were told to beat their wives if dinner wasn't on the table on time. They were told that the primary role of their wife is to obey, and they had to be trained through what they called spanking or abuse. To me, that's more like abuse. Obviously, like hitting, spanking is such a weird word that people
It is a weird word now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like really strange.
I don't even, like, I'm 30 and I don't have any, well, maybe I do. I just don't know, but I don't have any friends that are even my age that were treated that way growing up. It just seems, it's so dated to me. Like, that doesn't even make sense.
Totally. I definitely think that we've shifted more toward like emotional kind of control with kids,
Right,
with timeouts and like grounding and withholding things or putting limits and punishments.
A lot of if then, like, if you do this, then I will do that. Like a lot of conditional. That to me, that's what comes up first in terms of the way that we manipulate children.
Yeah, totally. So the way that people could learn how to interact with children a little bit better would be to stop focusing on their behavior and seeing them as only these creatures that your role is to just make them obey. It sounds really simple, and it is.
Oh, yeah.
But if you could just shift your role a little bit from your goal of the interaction is to train them for adulthood. Like, honestly, that's one of the biggest pitfalls, is that we're constantly trying to train children for adulthood. It's like a way of living. I mean, what if people that were retiring soon had to take classes, all day, every day? Well, not even if they're going to retire soon, but somebody our age, you know what I mean? Yeah. Well, I'm a lot older than you. So, I mean, somebody my age, if I was told that I have to go take retirement classes and sit in a class and be graded for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week in a brick building away from the real world, how fulfilling would my life be if my only role was to constantly be preparing for retirement? So kids in our culture do that right now. They're constantly preparing. What are you going to be when you grow up? And, like constant adult preparation, which is robbing them completely of being children and being present. And I have a hard time meditating. I'm just going to throw that in there. And the reason I'm sharing that is because, like, I want to get back to learning how to be in the now. And I can do it really well. And I'm trying to learn more skills, but isn't that really sad that I have to heal from never living that way? Because everybody in my life, my whole life it was like fear of the future living constantly. So I believe that kids that have the freedom to live now will never have to go through all the hoops that we all try to jump through to try to get back to our natural state of being present. So that's another aspect of not only the institution, but the authoritarian or traditional paradigm. It's constant preparation for the future. So That being said, when you interact with kids, treat them like you would another adult, like with that same level of respect and kindness and being present instead of performance-based connection. So tell me, how have you changed your interaction? I'm curious,
what? To talk about that. Yeah. There are a couple of questions that I now say to myself internally when I'm observing people. Not just kids, because as you say, like, treat kids the way you treat a friend, a colleague, your spouse. I mean, so one thing that you said at some point is that you're asking the question constantly: how can I create more freedom? How can I live just in a way that allows me to achieve a little bit more freedom. And you can always continuously ask this question. One of my close friends, you'd love her work, Dayna. Her name's Peta Kelly. She's from Perth, Australia, petakelly.com. And she has an event just happened in Sydney called The New Way Live. And it's really for millennials and helping them just approach life in a completely new way. And this girl's just unbelievable. But she asks this question. She teaches this, can I let it get just a little bit better? Like life, whatever, just it. Can I let it get a bit better? So I ask myself questions like that. But when I'm watching people, and today, for example, while I was watching, to give everyone some context and to paint this picture, I am a choral conductor. I have a music education. I have a voice degree in performance, operatic singing, choral music from University of Western Ontario in London. And I grew up with two parents who are choral conductors. So this work for me, this is my craft. It's my genius. It's what comes more easily to me than anything else, working with a large group of singers and getting them to create beautiful music. One of the I conduct 5 choirs, all boys. And one of the choirs I conduct is 80 plus boys, grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 in this independent boys school here in Oakville. Wonderful school called Limbrick School. And you can imagine that when your goal is to get 80 boys between the ages of 8 and 13 to stand on risers together at the same time and sing the same words at the same time with diction and all this music education stuff that I know that's in my brain. It's a challenge, but I love it. It's my favorite thing. And it's very easy as a conductor and a leader of that many people trying to do the same thing at the same time to fall and be trapped and really become a bit of an authority and to be snappy. And really just quick direction. And I'm a high energy leader and person just in general. And because I get energized from this work. So now the question I'm constantly trying to ask myself is, what does he need right now? So today there was a boy who was kind of in the back row, and I actually wasn't in front of the choir. I was playing the piano at the time. And this kid was not really participating. He was kind of just like, he had chosen to sit down on the riser in the back and just kind of zone out. Everyone else was singing. And the Dave from like 2 months ago would have said, hey, so-and-so, stand up and sing. And instead, internally, I just asked myself the question, what does he need right now? And I could tell he was kind of just disengaged, not really into it. And so I just like quietly leaned over. I wasn't actually doing anything in either at the time. Just quietly leaned over and said, hey, if you want to just like go for a walk or whatever, just feel free. And I just left it at that. I didn't tell him to do that. I just say, hey, I just gave him permission because it's like he's not used to that. That's really weird for a teacher to say, like, if you just want to like go chill in the hallway for a few, like, yeah, your call. And I said that to him very quietly. And within about 10 seconds, he actually stood up again and started singing. And that just by his own choice. Later in the afternoon, I was working with about 13 grade 5 boys. So they're 10, 11 years old. And we had rehearsed this one song in one of the Christmas piece that we're doing. And we had done it. And I was really excited by the way they had just performed it. I'm like, I'm
sorry, the connection's really bad. I can't hear what you're saying anymore. I'm sorry.
And unmute, turn video on and off. How's that, Dayna? Any better?
Yeah, it seems better.
How's that? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. It's
cool.
Better. Thank you.
What did I cut out? I won't go back, but just what did you hear?
Okay. You said you were working with 13 fifth graders.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're working. We did this run through of this piece, and at the end, I said, we still had time left, about 10 minutes left in the class, and then before the bell goes, and I asked them, like, do you want to do that again? And about 2/3 of them said no, and 1/3 of them said yes. And so instead of making a decision as to whether or not we were going, like 2 months ago, I would have been like, you know what, let's do it one more time. Everyone stand up, let's go. Instead, I said, okay, well, if you don't feel like doing it again, totally cool. your homeroom teacher's over there, just like go hang with him. Like we're in the gym and there's a big open space, and like just go hang with him. Or if you want to go back to your classroom, I'm sure like he's cool with that. Just down the hall, like just go. And if you want to stay and run it again with me, I want to do it again. So you can stay with me. And so 6 of them stayed with me. The rest of them went down the hall with their teacher, with Jamie, and that was that. And they were so surprised. They was like, really? We can just like, we don't have to do it again? And I'm like, no, if you want to, you can just like leave. And so those are just 2 examples from today. But I don't know. I mean, I'm curious to hear your.
Yeah, that's the internet's screwed up again. I'm sorry, I can't really hear you.
That's okay. That's okay. It's still recording fine, but I was just saying I'd love to hear your thoughts on.
Oh yeah, I mean, I honestly, like, I really almost teared up hearing what you're saying. I mean, what you're doing is exactly what I hope so many people start doing, is giving children choice, you know, and it's more work. I know, like, that's the whole thing, is forcing kids and having an approach of just like, okay, everybody stand up, you're doing this, whether you like it or not, kind of thing. Yes, that's easier for the adult, you know, that's there with them. Being present and respectful of everybody's needs, not just your own. It takes a lot more time, but it's such an investment. It's such an investment in like them wanting to be there, wanting to be with you, wanting to be with everybody else, and taking part in something really special where they're respected. Like, it's incredible. Like, if kids can only have one person in their life treating them like you did today, I mean, it's huge. It's a bigger deal than you think, just to make those little tweaks. And I'm really, really happy to hear that you did that. That's so great.
These are subtle tweaks, because I tend to be, and I think, you know, one of the reasons I have 80 boys in my boys choir, when this choir, there were like 5 when I started 5 years ago, is because I tend to connect well with kids. It's something that's always been natural for me. I kind of act like a kid a lot. I'm very goofy with them, very silly, very playful. And I think that I've always tried to speak to them like they're my friends, whether they're like 6 years old or, I mean, I have boys in my community men's choir called A Few Good Men. I have guys as old as 26, 27 years old. And the youngest is 6, actually, no, 5. But I try to basically like speak to them all the same way.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, just with when child feels respected and that their needs matter as much as yours, that's when they truly will connect and do so much better in a situation like that. They're going to sing better, and everything in their lives will be better as a side effect of that. So cool. That's great.
I have some questions that have actually been submitted by some folks who listen to the podcast, and I've collected them over the past week or so through our Facebook group. So I've got a list here, and we can kind of call this like a lightning round, so to speak. So
sure, yeah.
You can keep your answers like kind of, you know,
no problem. Sure, yes.
And there's actually like 9 of them here.
Okay.
I think there's some really cool questions. So the first one is from Kathy. She says, and Kathy's a mom of 2 girls, actually. I know her, wonderful girls. And she said, is it hard to find, maybe was it, but was or is, present tense or past, you decide.
Okay.
Is it hard to find the courage to parent this way when it's so uncommon and often looked down upon or questioned by others?
No.
Cool.
Because I care more about what my children think of me than what other people, my strangers or other people in my life think of me.
Cool. Nice. When you first started, this is the next question. When you first started, where did you draw the strength or confidence from? So think back like 10, 11 years ago.
My son. Yeah, my firstborn, who's 17 now, definitely. Because I trusted him from the beginning. And then as every child I had, I did the same thing with. I trusted them. So it was really natural.
You had already, Devin was being unschooled for from the time he was born, but yeah. You didn't start to like really speak up and advocate for it until a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke when he was maybe 2. I spoke at a few events, and when the Dr. Phil show called us, he was like 5, I think.
Okay.
No, he was like 7. My kids were like 2, 5, and 7 at the time. Okay. And being on his show, like, is what pretty much was the starting point for
no kidding
huge media focus on this life. So, yeah.
Right. Okay. Was there ever a time that you doubted your choice to unschool? If so, when and how did that situation play out for you?
Never. No.
Cool.
It's kind of crazy to say that probably, but no, I never
Right,
done
right.
it ever.
Why do you think that is?
Because I know in my heart. I mean, just like you knew when you heard certain things that just resonated with you. My heart tells me, and my children tell me, and
Cool.
it's just the way that it should be.
All right. Next question. Lightning round. Um, have your kids ever questioned your choices or asked to go to traditional school?
Never. I mean, my choices in general, maybe, like with like, why are you buying that food product, or
Right.
whatever, but never for their being how they're parented or
Got it.
educated.
Cool. Oh, I like this question a lot. I'm sure you've heard this before, but do you think unschooling is best for all children, or is it something that is best suited for certain personality types or learning styles?
I think it's suitable for all children in that, coming from the partnership dynamic, I mean, just respecting what a child wants to do is the right thing to do. So, yeah, I do think it's right for all children. I don't think it's right for all adults or all parents if they're not able to do it well. So, being able to facilitate your child's education, it's a very hands-on role. It's not for the lazy parent. So I don't know if every parent has the freedom or the time or is able to do that.
What do you feel most parents of young children don't truly understand about the school system?
What the focus is there, honestly. If you do a little research on the history of school, you'll find out why they were built. They were built to train factory workers and to kind of keep everybody in a mediocre kind of jobs in life and to work for somebody. So your child's being conditioned to take orders and obey and work for somebody else, unlike a more respectful approach where most unschoolers go on to be entrepreneurs. I mean, my kids have their own businesses, so it's like they wouldn't really do well in a job working for somebody else necessarily, unless they truly wanted to be there.
Mm. It's interesting you say that, your kids are entrepreneurs and they've had their businesses for a long time. I've had some fun conversations with people, including my wife actually at times, when I've said things like I kind of had this belief that everyone is wired to be an entrepreneur, and I've said that, like, I think everyone is designed to be, and I always get pushback. It's like, no, not everyone is designed to be an entrepreneur. Like, some people just want to like get a job, and I'm like, well, I believe that it's everyone's nature really to just want to solve problems and help other people, which is really all entrepreneurship is. But we've learned in our society that entrepreneurship, which is really a long word and it's hard to spell and like it sounds fancy, and we've learned that, like, especially now in the tech age with apps and like tech startups being sexy and stuff, like a lot of people have been conditioned to believe that like to be an entrepreneur is like this really like only for like the select few risk takers and like people with high risk tolerance and like the outliers of society. And I just don't believe that's true, but I think that's the reality.
Well, I think it's the reality because that's the conditioning.
Yeah.
There's people are really invested in us feeling that way. So, it's very different. And my kids, to them, working and making money off what they love is really normal and natural. It's not a difficult thing. And I think you're exactly right. Like, people are wired to make money and help people and make a difference in this world.
Exchange energy or whatever stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Why do so many simply blindly enroll their children without even considering other options? Like, and that is so true. I mean, and I can speak to the Canadian. So, I mean, I don't know, in the States, I'm not as familiar with the public school system, but Canada is fairly regarded as a country with a really progressive public education system. And we pride ourselves on it a little bit. And even in some of the local schools here, with really tremendous, really smart, creative people working inside them. I mean, I know we have across the board now in Ontario, kindergarten is completely play-based learning. So it's focused on the work of Peter Gray. And I think that extends up to some of the earlier grades, 1, 2, 3, where the children just essentially like play and they have fun. And then the teachers support that learning and they facilitate that learning where they see children taking interest. So, even in these more progressive education systems, do you still feel like there are pieces missing? And then going back to this question, why do you feel most parents just don't ever consider other options?
Well, most people don't even know. Actually, what they do know is homeschooling. And I think most people
Totally.
are conditioned, most adults, most parents are trained to train up their children, and controlling another human being all day, every day, and focusing on behavior modification and punishments, and being consistent and enforcing and not being manipulated. Like, it's exhausting to live life in the authoritarian dynamic with somebody else all the time. They can't even fathom having to force their children to do schoolwork on top of it.
Yeah.
People are like, homeschooling, my God, no, I can barely get them to brush their teeth, or I can't even imagine. I need a break from it. You don't need a break from your kids. You need a break from controlling, punishing, and not connecting. It's really comes down to that altogether. And no matter how great a school system is, or a country's school system, if a child doesn't want to be there, it will be damaging to them, period. It all comes down to children's rights. So it doesn't, like, if a child wants to go to school, then that's great. They're going to get a lot out of it. They're going to have an experience based on their own desire, and learning really can never be forced, And so, like, if a child doesn't want to be there, forced learning is just such an offense to me. Like, it's freedom of mind is like one of the things that's really sacred to me. And when you're constantly poking and prying in another human being's brain to try to assess what they know, it's pretty degrading and disrespectful.
The next question here is, how can parents before the age of 4, let's say, truly know what their child's learning needs will be, or what environment they will best thrive in?
Well, I just think listening to them and connecting with them and knowing them. When you're somebody's parent, I mean, you know them better than anyone else in the world. Mm-hmm. And so you just keep following their lead. It's pretty simple.
And then I guess the last question that's been submitted here is, what are some of your favorite, on this topic, resources that you've used, or maybe there's a list that you have somewhere that one should focus on when it comes to unschooling, especially if their kids have a certain level of schooling already. So let's say that, there's a child that's gone to grade 1 or 2 or 3, maybe grade 6, 7, beyond in traditional school, and now a parent is deciding they're going to unschool. Where does that parent, are there some resources that you would maybe steer them toward, or how would they begin that process?
Well, I mean, just like every child's a unique learner, every parent is going to learn about it differently. So I think just start researching and find like an advocate or somebody that shares about this life in a way that you can relate and connect. There's just as many people promoting freedom for kids. And one of them is named Alfie Cohen. He wrote a book called Unconditional Parenting. So he really delves into the needs under the behavior. So there's different avenues. So as far as the parenting goes, there's so many great resources. Alfie Cohen, myself, if you want to connect with me, I do one-on-one coaching, and I also have a huge Yahoo group. I mean, not Yahoo group. Oh my gosh. See, I'm showing my age now. Yahoo was my Yahoo group was my first advocacy. No, a Facebook group. Yes. And we have
That's awesome.
14,000 members of this Facebook group called Whole Life Unschooling. My husband and I moderate it. So
I'd love to be in that. Yeah.
Yeah, jump in there, ask questions, and learning from other parents, and like hearing the answers from other people. Mm-hmm. I mean, once you start doing it, it just becomes really second nature, and it's really joyful to facilitate your kids' learning. And you'll have plenty of support if you reach out.
I know that we want to wrap up shortly, Dayna. I just have a couple more questions, and you've touched on these topics already in this conversation, but these are hot topics right now. And some of my listeners know that. So my primary business with my business partner, Blake, is called, we have a company called My Life Online. So we have a program that teaches kids to be safe, smart, and kind online. And we love technology. And our program is different than a lot of other digital citizenship cyberbullying programs that are all about the scary world of social media and internet safety and really fear-based education. And we've created this workshop and curriculum that schools purchase from us that essentially empowers kids to just create a positive and productive life online. And but in that realm, we get a lot of questions about screen time. And how much is too much. And there are statistics, like someone shared with me the other day, a parent said that, there are stats that are now showing that the kids are on their devices or in front of a screen 6, 7, or 8 hours outside of school, like not counting school work time where, they might be using technology for learning. So this screen time thing is huge. And we've recently learned about a piece of technology called Circle with Disney. I don't know if you've come across this piece of technology.
No.
But it's essentially a device that connects to your Wi-Fi, and there's an app, and it allows parents to essentially like install this into their home, and then it monitors the screen time and usage of every individual app on every person's device, and you can set bedtimes for the internet or for specific people in the house and kind of control it with that technology. And I guess there are multiple ways to use that technology and set it up with your kids or just set it up for your kids. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But nonetheless, screen time and media is a massive topic right now. And I know that obviously you have, I know what your approach with this is, but I just would love for you to speak to that for this audience.
Sure. There's so many things to say about it, but I'll try to be to the point.
Sure.
For one, we live in a book worshiping culture. Like it wasn't very long ago that parents were told never to let their kids listen to the radio. Like before TV, they were warned that the radio waves will melt their brain and like it's damaging. And like parents, I remember my grandmother saying she could only listen to the radio for half an hour a day. And like, so it's TV and media.
How quickly we forget all this too, right? Like,
I know, right? I know, it's ridiculous.
It's recency bias. Yeah.
And so the same thing, I think it's important to take into account, like what history has shown us, that TV is relatively new, as well as, computer gaming, any kind of screen time or whatever is relatively new. And I think people are still fearful. I mean, there's so much propaganda when something's new against it. Everything. That's just the nature of acceptance and understanding that it can be a real amazing tool. My kids have never had limits. I've never ever, could never even imagine doing that to them. Just like I would never do that to my husband, because I'm not fearful. I know just from having 4 kids and having seen them interact with media and screens, that no damaging side effects have happened. They use media as a tool, screen time. I can't imagine like if my kid was reading a book for 6, 7 hours a day, telling them not to. It's really the same thing. But I know people aren't there. They're going to think that most people say like there's studies that show that it affects their brain and it does this and that. And I'm really familiar with it, especially Waldorf education, which is very anti kind of technology or screens. Mm-hmm. So what would I say? I would say I wouldn't control it. And I'm going to share why. Because whenever you control something, it causes a really unnatural relationship between the child and what's being controlled. If you think back to your own childhood and the things that you maybe did when you weren't ready for as a young teenager, whether it's drinking or being promiscuous or whatever was banned or forbidden and limited in your life, you wanted to do it. It's because by nature you want the freedom and trust and respect that you deserve to make these choices. And when you stand between your child and what they want to do, and it becomes a power struggle, a child will hold on like so hard and overuse something just for the sake of wanting their freedom, and so control really warps the relationship so much. Sure. And so most parents don't have any idea the result of giving freedom with these things. They just make assumptions, and they may like lift limits for a day or two and just be like, oh my gosh, all my child did was watch TV. And it's like,
but that's a reaction to
that's a reaction to control.
To what came before.
Completely. And plus your child doesn't trust you yet again, so they don't know when you're going to take it away again or limit it. So of course, all they're going to want to do is that. So I think just really start undoing the idea of like all the conditioned ideas that things are dangerous and wrong. And there's a really good book, actually. It's called Everything That's Bad for You is Good for You. Get it on Amazon. It's really good. It talks about this in depth. It's hard to articulate sometimes these kind of things because it's such a personal, reactive thing for people.
Yeah. When I think about it, I feel very lucky because my parents did not I mean, maybe they did, and it's very subconscious, and I don't even realize it in certain ways. But they didn't try to control me when I was growing up, especially when I was a teenager. I never remember my parents telling me anything in terms of like, with related to alcohol, drugs, sex. They never once worried about it. Like they never said, make sure that you don't do that, don't do drugs. Like just, it was never a conversation with any of those topics. They really, I always felt like I had a lot of trust from my parents. And as a result, I mean, I am probably one of the only people I know that's to this day never smoked a cigarette, never experimented with drugs, with recreational drugs. I've never, I mean, drinking's never been something that I was really into. I had lots of friends that did. I was peer pressured like crazy. And I laughed at my friends who tried to peer pressure me because I just like so didn't care. And I knew that even if I did, that wasn't rebelling, because I don't know that my parents, I mean, when I was in grade 10, I had a cast party for a musical and I got really drunk and was seriously hungover the next day. My parents totally knew, and they didn't even say anything. They just helped me. They just like, I was puking in the morning and they just like helped me. They made sure that I was like feeling better, and they never even talked about it. They're just like,
maybe that's why this life kind of appeals to you, because it makes sense, on some level in that way. I think it's also so important to realize that children learn so much from screens. I hate using the word screens. I am, because you did. Just, I feel like it's like a disrespectful word, but I am using it for the sake of, clarity.
What they're, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine limiting, like anytime you limit anything, you're limiting learning, period.
And I mean, if I think about it as an entrepreneur today, and people that are listening to this know that I have multiple businesses, and I mean, I live on a screen. Like we're on Zoom right now, Dayna, and this is the platform that it's like my office. Like this Zoom room is literally where I live for large chunks of the day. So my screen time, I mean, I don't limit my screen time. That's how it's a tool that I use to create my income and to like sustain my family. And it just doesn't make sense to me. Like I would never do that to myself. At the same time, I naturally set boundaries and decide when it's time for me to like go to bed and all those things. And I think a lot of the reason that kids are binging on the tech outside of their school is simply because for 8 or more hours of their prime time during a day, they're being told they can't take out their screens. They can't. Right. They can't. So from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., it's a absolutely no tech. And what do you think they're going to do after 4 p.m. as much as possible?
They're going to do what they want because, they've been told what to do all day and they can't do anything they want. They have no freedom and they're living somebody else's agenda. I can't even imagine like them limiting what they want to be doing. I can't. And I think giving information is so important. So don't make the assumption, anyone listening, that this is like a hands-off approach where, it can seem like that when you first hear about it, but understand that it's my responsibility as a parent to give my kids information. And because they trust me, because they know I'm not the wall between them and what they want. They know they have freedom. They know that things aren't going to be limited. They're not going to be punished and shamed and, controlled to meet my needs or whatever. When I give them information, they know it's true. Like they turn to me as like a guide for information. So my son Orion, my 8-year-old, likes the computer. He loves playing certain games he's really into right now. And I'll remind him, remember you got a headache a couple days ago, like when you want to go for a walk, maybe just stretch your legs out. How do your legs feel? Because he sits cross-legged and sometimes one of his legs gets kind of sore, because he's little and he's focused. And so I help him. I got like a thing for him to put his legs on. I bring him snacks when he's playing. I interact with him. I connect with him based on what he loves.
Yeah.
So it's not like a babysitter where I'm like, oh, cool, he's playing, I can go do whatever. Where sometimes that's the case because we all, need a break and have dishes to do or whatever. But I love to find out what he loves about these games. When my son Devin, who's 17, started playing Minecraft, he played the beta version. He was like one of the first kids out of the first couple thousand to ever play the game, the beta version. And when he was into Minecraft, he did it like morning, noon, and night. He loved it. He was so immersed with this game. So I used it, like I do all things with my kids when it comes to educating them, is the nucleus of his learning. So we subscribe to gaming magazines. We we even brought him to Las Vegas to meet Notch, the creator of the game. And he sat and talked and spent time with Notch. That's how much we support everything, because although to you it might look like a video game, if you were to break down everything that game involves, if you were to break it down into subjects, you would see that the game does touch on all the subjects. Crazy as it sounds, it does. And so I used it as a tool, as the nucleus of his learning, and also connecting with them. Like, when my kids say to me, Mom, can I show you what I built on Minecraft? Like, that means so much to me. Like, I'll sit down and they'll show me. Yeah, and I love it. Like, I love what they're learning. And yeah, so it's not just a game. It's much more, these games that they're into.
I mean, if Mark Zuckerberg's parents told him to limit his screen time, I mean, we'd have no Facebook.
It's true. It's true.
But it's crazy, right? It's like, you would never tell Mark Zuckerberg, 17-year-old who was already doing he was programming and doing all kinds of wild and crazy stuff well before he created Facebook. But if you told 15, 16, 17-year-old Zuckerberg, hey, only 2 hours of screen time after school hours.
Right.
What are you restricting the world from? I mean, like, that's like, that's wild when you think about it. But I mean, and it's not to say that every kid who's like on Snapchat is building the next Instagram, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
The point is, it doesn't matter what they're building or not building, or do you know what I mean? Like, it's just, they're expressing themselves, they're communicating, they're creating, they're learning. I don't know.
No, I totally get it. And you're right. And I think it can be really confusing for parents with young kids sometimes, because they'll see their child on and they'll be like, okay, half an hour more. And the child's frustrated and they don't want to be controlled. They want to focus on what they're doing and playing their game. And these games take a long time to like create and build and focus on. There's so many layers to them that when their child starts screaming and getting angry or rebelling, or they think it's caused from the game, when all this like bad behavior is caused by the control. That is the big screwy thing with it, is like parents blame behavior on food when it's the controlling of the food that causes the bad behavior. And when you stop controlling and you connect and give information and help them get what they want in life, the side effects that you thought were caused by these things, they don't exist. And you see that it was the control that was causing them all along. Yeah.
Well, I know we could talk forever, and maybe we will again and have another interview at some point. But I just want to thank you so much, Dayna, for creating the time in your evening, in your day, to make this happen. And for folks listening right now, if you want to learn more about Dayna's work, please go to daynamartin.com. We will link that up in the show notes. And you can find her family's YouTube channel. If you just search on YouTube, the Sparkling Martins. And of course, her kids, I believe, also have their own, or at least two of your children have their own YouTube channels.
Yeah, well, Tiff Martin, Tiffany does. My daughter's 15, and she has a YouTube channel. And my son, Devin, he doesn't really upload on it anymore, but he has an Etsy store. He makes, he's a blacksmith. Another whole amazing story that I won't get into, but because he had the freedom to play with fire, he became a blacksmith and now makes very beautiful knives and swords and essentially makes a living. So, I'm really excited to connect with anybody that wants to connect with me.
You can find her on Instagram. What's your Instagram?
Official Dayna Martin.
Official Dayna Martin, as opposed to the unofficial.
Yeah, there was a couple like.
I believe you. Yeah,
kids start Instagrams with people's names sometimes, and
it's a good strategy. I applaud them for that. It's great. I mean, they know what they're doing, right? They're smart. Social media ninjas. They're like, I know how to get followers. Make a Dayna Martin account.
It's happened. Trust me.
Yeah, I know. It's
crazy. But I'm so glad you reached out to me. That's great. Thank you for inviting me to be on, and it's an honor to spend time with you and share more about this life. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.